Okay, perfect. So thank you, Katherine Denkers, for joining us today. We're so excited to hear about your story and your journey. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you is in terms of your undergrad experience. So I wanted to know what programs and courses did you study in your undergrad program and at which university?
Right. So I started my undergrad career in 2006. I went to the University of Guelph for a Bachelor of Arts. I got a Bachelor of Arts in Classical History and Poli-Sci, the minor in Poli-Sci. And I did not know what I wanted to do. I just picked those courses because I really, really enjoyed them. And so they were the courses I could get the best marks in. I feel like when you're doing a Bachelor of Arts, it doesn't super matter what topic you're picking. Some of the poli-sci courses did help me later on when I eventually chose the law. But honestly, so did some of the classical history courses. It just, if you take something that you enjoy and that you're good at, in the arts system, I think that's the best case scenario. And I liked it so much. I actually stayed with the classics and ended up taking a master's at McMaster University that was a 2-year program with a written thesis. I know a lot about Alexander the Great and his father.
Wow.
So if there's any history buffs that like really want to know about Alexander the Great's father, we can talk about that too. But I decided after I finished that program that being a professor of classical history was not in the cards for me. That's not what my career path was going to be. So I took some time off to think about things. I was just working restaurant jobs at that point. And it was actually my sister who's like, you need to go back to school and now get something that is a little bit more marketable. Whether be a teacher, be a lawyer, but at least like with a law degree, you might have multiple applications for your degree, whereas a teacher is kind of like, you're a one track. So that's what I did. And that was in the fall of 2012. Yes. Which was too late for me to apply to Canadian law schools. I wasn't going to make, I think it was a November deadline then. I'm not sure if it's the same now.
Right.
So I would have had to wait a year to apply for the November of 2013 so that I could go in September of 2014. But I found the law schools in the UK, because in the UK, law school is an undergraduate course. If you have a degree, you can finish it, a law degree in 2 years instead of 3.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And you can apply and go all in the same year. So like that was really the big selling feature, was I could just apply in 2013 and go in 2013.
Wow.
So I did, and I went to University of Sussex, which is in Brighton in the UK. So if you know where London is in the UK, you're going straight down to the beach. That's where Brighton is. It's a beach town. It is a lot of fun. It's kind of like the LGBTQ capital of the UK, and Pride in the summer there is insane. They're also pretty famous for their naked bike ride, which is a fundraiser. I never found out what they're fundraising money for, but there was a lot of naked people on bicycles. And, also November 5th, the Guy Fawkes Day started in Lewis, which is just a little town outside of Brighton. And so that whole town is basically on fire November 5th. And that's like, it was a really fun place to live for 2 years.
Absolutely. No, it sounds like it. It definitely sounds I mean, the events that you mentioned are very unique. I personally have never heard about some of them, so it's very interesting to hear that. And I'm sure it must have been very fun to experience all of that in person. And it must have definitely helped, right, with the studying, and then you go and have, fun at this event. So
There was a great work-life balance. Really good. Yeah.
incredible. And so in terms of admissions to UK law schools, I know that it's a bit different from, the admission process in like Canadian law schools. Like, I believe that in terms of LSAT, is LSAT required for UK law schools?
You don't have to do the LSAT. And in terms of actually like submitting your applications, it feels a lot more like when I was going from high school to my BA, and there was like a program where you could choose this number of schools, just do one application and send it to 5 or 6 different schools.
Oh, wow. I see.
Yeah, so really streamlined.
I see. So what kind of, I guess, like, what are the components of the application? So you had like your transcripts, and then was there a personal statement, or what kind of like, components were there?
I don't 100% remember. I remember it being very simple and straightforward. I think you had to do a 2-page essay about why you were choosing the program that you were choosing. It wasn't about the schools necessarily, because you were sending it to all the different schools. So you weren't gonna be like, and I only want to go to one place. So it was really simple, really straightforward. It did not cost a lot to do the actual application. And beside the transcripts, I can't think of anything. I had to confirm that I would be eligible to apply for a student visa in the UK. So no criminal records and things like that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, perfect. Now, when you were at law school, were there any courses that you took that really stood out to you?
So at the University of Sussex, if you're in the 2-year graduate program, all of the courses are chosen for you, except you get one option in your second year. And most of the Canadians there were taking evidence. We wouldn't have to take evidence as a NCA course when they got back. We'll get to the NCAs later, but that's what most of the Canadians were taking. I know a few others that ended up taking family law instead too. And then there was a few Canadians that were actually chose to be in the 3-year program, even though they could have been in the 2-year program, just because they wanted those extra courses. And so their 3rd year, it was just wide open to them, and they could take pretty much anything. But what is kind of special about Sussex, they have a constitution course that you take in 1st year. For the Canadians, they give you the option to take, to split the course in half and do like 50% UK constitution and 50% Canadian constitution. And they use the same textbook that you'll eventually use in your qualifying exams when you come back and convert your degree over. Since I've left, the University of Sussex now teams up with Laurier here in Ontario. And so you can start your BA in Laurier and go through to the UK and finish an LLB in the University of Sussex in 4 or 5 years, I think. I'm not really super familiar with the program, but I know they're teamed up so that's all one continuous thing. So they work really, really closely with a lot of Canadians to make sure that their course material is going to be helpful to us.
Absolutely, and that's great. And thank you for mentioning that. I'm sure our students can definitely explore, these joint programs. And it's nice. I mean, I believe both England and Canada use the common law system, correct?
Yep. And actually, up until the 80s, the House of Lords in the UK was the highest court in Canada. So a lot of our common law and precedents up until the 80s is still coming from the UK.
Right.
So there's not a lot of history to go back and like backtrack and try to figure out where the split is and what happened there. Pretty much like the Charter of Rights came in and then things started to diverge a bit more. But before that, we're all the same.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so after you completed your 2 years and then you had to come and do your qualifying exams, could you talk about that experience?
Yeah. So coming back to do the qualifying exams, if you've done the 2-year program, you had to take 7 exams, which kind of makes up for the full 3rd year of law school that you missed out on.
Right.
You always have to take a core 5, which is Constitution, Administration, Criminal, Lawyer Ethics, and Professional Conduct. And I believe the 5th one is public. Did I say public already? Another like government bureaucracy law category. Because those are the main things that are really different between the 2 countries. After that, the next 2 that you pick, you get a list that they will give to you based on what you took in the UK for you to choose 2 from. And I think I probably had about 5 or 6 courses to choose from to pick my 2 out of. I ended up doing tort and civil procedure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. And so how much time did you have to like study and do those 7 exams?
You can pretty much take as much time as you want. I believe when you first apply for the NCAs, from the time that you apply and they send you your course list, I think it's 3 to 5 years. You have to finish everything. I was working full time. I came back to my hometown of Chatham-Kent. I was really lucky that a local firm had a receptionist that was going on mat leave. So they had me come in to cover her mat leave. I was working as a receptionist at the law firm full time while doing the studying for the NCAs and the exams for the NCAs. And I finished them in about a year, just under a year.
Wow. Well, congratulations. I mean, I know even though you're way past that now, that's still amazing to be able to pass 7 exams in 1 year. That's fantastic. So congratulations. And so now, could you talk about like the field of law that you're practicing now, and what do you like most about this field of law?
Great. So I am a family lawyer predominantly. Well, after I finished the NCAs, I was very lucky that the firm I was working at let me do my articling there. And then I was working there for about 3 years as a lawyer. And it was a general practice firm. My main focus was family law, but I also was helping with wills and estates and real estate, maybe a little bit of corporate stuff, and then some general civil litigation because we were a firm that did everything. And then it was just last year, September 2020, that I decided to go out on my own and just focus on family law and specifically focusing on family law outside of court. So I became a certified family mediator as well through the Ontario Association for Family Mediation, OAFM.
Right.
And so what I really love about that and about my job, and it's kind of weird to say because family law is like kind of known for being unpleasant because it's a really unpleasant process for the clients to go through a separation and divorce. Yeah. But what I really like about what I'm doing is that it tries to take the best road possible for these couples that are going through this horrendous time, offering mediation, offering collaborative law processes, and all of these things that are built to not just treat people as like legal entities, but as people.
Right.
So we have a lot of training through mediation about like communication styles and personality styles and how to orchestrate conflict resolution between those people. And so a lot of the time my work feels much more cathartic than it did before when I was just taking people through the court system, kind of like kicking and screaming the whole way. We get to slow everything down and it's quiet and it's intimate. It's just us in a room talking two people, about being people, about going through something really, really crappy together and just trying to make the best that we can out of it.
Absolutely. No, that sounds fantastic. And I love that you bring that element of humanity to it, right? Because oftentimes I feel like law is, at least in the mainstream way, viewed as this like black and white, very sort of robotic kind of, field. But it's so important for that humanity element because at the end of the day, we're all, both the clients and the lawyers and mediators are all humans, right? So I'm glad that you bring that into it. And that's fantastic to hear. And so that's what you like about this field. Is there anything that you maybe dislike about this field?
Um, it's kind of the opposite side of the coin. So right now there's been it was March 2021, huge changes came through the Canadian family law system. They did away with the terminology of custody and access for kids. They put in actual definitions of what family violence is and means, and what coercive control is and means in terms of domestic abuse, because it's not always violent. And so it's really, there's this huge shift that is only just beginning to start happening. And that can be a really exciting time. It feels very progressive and like we're going somewhere good. But at the same time, it's also really frustrating because you could be working with lawyers that have been doing the same thing for 60 years. And they're not shifting with you as quickly as you would sometimes like them to be. And so that can, it feels like someone's dragging you down a bit, and that can be really frustrating. But everybody's trying to do their best, and they're just trying to do the job the best way that they know how. But it's harder for the younger people, I think, to just like roll with the punches from some of the older guys in the industry.
All right, for sure. No, definitely. I can definitely see how that could be frustrating. But I mean, yeah, and like you mentioned, at the end of the day, we're all trying our best, and I guess that's what counts, right? Despite all the, differences and challenges that may come with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Catherine, could you tell me about a typical day in your career, like in terms of responsibilities and tasks? What does a typical day look like to you?
Right. So since I started my own practice in September 2020 in the midst of COVID, one of the silver linings of COVID is that everybody went completely virtual pretty much. So it was really easy to just work from my home office.
Which is beautiful, by the way. I love the books in the back.
Yeah. So I live and work at home. I usually start my morning with the emails, and I would have made a to-do list the night before. So then I'll go through my emails, compare it to my to-do list, maybe add some things, maybe cross things off depending on what's in that inbox. I like to slow roll my mornings. So I do that like over a cup of coffee. I'll do some of the easy tasks first that don't involve talking to other people, because I'm a bit of an introvert, and so I keep my energy for the afternoon. And then in the afternoon, I return calls. I have my set appointments, whether they're consultations, whether they're mediations, client checkups. And that will probably go from like lunch until about 6. And then in the evening, I enjoy time with my dog, Zeus. We have a German Shepherd, Zeus, and my partner, Spencer. Yeah. And we're out in the countryside, so there's lots of stuff to do together.
Oh, for sure. I love that. And I love that mix of like, independent time and alone time, and that mix of then, the meetings and all the socials, and how you balance that. And I love that. It's so important to find that balance. And I'm glad that you found that for yourself, where in the mornings you prefer to do the tasks on your own and sort of focus on work. And then in the evenings is like your social time where you like have meetings and clients and things like that. And of course, in the evenings, it's so nice to have family time.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important. I mean, when I was going through law school, especially the Canadian law schools, I found, because we would talk to them frequently. People would try to work through the law schools when they got back to find articling positions and things like that.
Mhm.
And it just all felt like everything was ultra important. There was only one way to be a good lawyer. There was only one way. There's this track that you had to follow. If you didn't do your articles in this way at this time, you weren't going to succeed. Well, if you didn't get into one of the prestigious Bay Street Toronto firms, you weren't ever going to be like reaching your full potential or things like that. If you aren't working 90 hours a week, you're not working hard enough.
Mhm. Right.
They really kind of like glorify the hustle and glorify what working hard means.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important that people listen to their own voice about that.
Right.
You do not have to wear yourself out to be a good lawyer. You don't have to make yourself miserable to be a good lawyer. I do my best lawyer work when I'm happy, because that, especially when I'm dealing with divorcing couples
Right.
who are at their unhappiest,
Mhm.
if I'm also miserable, I can't help them.
Right. No, makes sense.
So, yeah. So
That's
it's
so
really important to
profound.
follow your heart when you get to that stage and be like, this is, I got to take care of me first.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's very profound. Have you always had that realization, or was it something that you had to sort of, learn along the way?
Um, it's something that I had to learn along the way. I went through a period where I was so stressed out that it was actually affecting my health. And like I would just break out in a rash.
Mm. Right.
Uh, it, I wasn't sleeping. I was going to the doctor to try and figure out how to make my body keep up to what I was trying to make it to do.
Mhm.
And it just came to me like it's not worth it.
Mhm. Right.
If your quality of life is so poor that you're literally falling apart, you need to do it differently. There's got to be a better way. And nobody else was happy around me either. My clients were going through a process that was absolutely miserable for them.
Mhm.
It took 2+ years for them to get a divorce through the court sometimes. They would come into my office at the beginning being like frustrated and angry. They would go through the process being frustrated and angry, and they would leave the process frustrated and angry. So
Right.
nobody was winning.
Mhm.
And at least now, though, the way that I approach family law, the services that I offer, I mean, not everybody's 100% happy all the time. I
Right.
can't claim that.
Makes sense.
But I do feel like my clients feel like they at least have control over the process. They have control and agency over what is happening. It's not happening to them. It's something that they are going through.
Right.
And it's not happening to me either. It's something that I am helping them through. And so
Right.
we're both better off for it.
Right, for sure. And thank you for sharing that with us. It's definitely very important. Even as like undergrad students, we're always feeling this pressure to overwork ourselves. And honestly, I feel like it's such a big misconception. People think the more you overwork, the better your quality of work will be. But then when I personally rest, I tend to get, better grades, and just the quality of work actually goes up instead of down, contrary to what many people may think.
It's the quality of the time that you spend, not the quantity of time that you spend.
Absolutely.
We're
Absolutely.
super focused for 3 hours. You can do it in 3 hours instead of 5.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For sure. And so, Catherine, I have a question for you, for me personally, because I've always like been intrigued by family law, but one of the things that sort of concerned me was the fact that because you're dealing with such, sensitive topics like, divorce, custody, and these topics can be difficult. How do you, I guess, manage not being emotionally attached to cases or to clients? How do you sort of navigate that?
Yes. Um, it takes practice.
Hmm.
It doesn't just happen. If you start out as a family lawyer, no matter what somebody tells you, no matter what advice you get, you're not going to get there until you practice it.
Right.
And I think a good thing to aim for is that you don't want to be so emotionally involved that you kind of take it home, that you like can't sleep at night because of what's going on. or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's impossible to be 100% removed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to remember what your role is
Mm-hmm.
in all of it. And your clients will come to you with a list of problems that just keeps growing.
Right.
And you can only control so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
As a lawyer, I really focus on what I can control with them and what they can control through me.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, them being able to at least feel like they have some agency in what's happening helps with the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it starts to fall into place because they figured out this section of it.
Mm-hmm.
Mediation and the training for that also helped a lot, because the training for that was a little bit more akin to social work, or a little bit more akin to just the humanity of it again, I guess. And so I could give clients, I have both of them in front of me instead of just the one side. So I actually get to hear the other side, and that helps so much, because you don't know, you only get to hear, when you only get to hear one side of the story, it sounds like this person is 100% correct and that person is 100% evil, which is hardly ever actually the case.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Beings aren't that simple. So when you get to have both people in front of you, it's much easier. You can still feel for both of them, but you're not emotionally involved to the point where you think, oh my God, this person's life has just completely been destroyed by the system and by this other person and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
They both are there for a reason. They both have their side of the story, and being able to hear both sides really helps. And if you can't hear both sides, you have to remember that there is another side.
Absolutely.
It's probably just as powerful if you were to hear it.
Absolutely. That's such a great point, for sure. Is that one of the reasons why maybe you switched into mediation, to have that chance to hear both sides?
Yes.
I see.
And because I live out in the countryside, the hometown that I practice mostly out of in Chatham-Kent is very rural.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have a lot of family lawyers. And so what's happening more and more is that either you have two people trying to work it out between themselves without lawyers at all, or one of them might have a lawyer, but the other person doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so even as a lawyer, I was frequently in these situations where I have a client, but I have to talk to the other person by themselves and not through a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So I get a little bit of it anyways. I'm like, well, if I'm going to be in that position, I need to do it. You can't do it as a lawyer because you'd have a conflict of interest.
Right.
So I needed to find a way to be able to do it the right way through mediation, so that I can help them more effectively.
I see. Would you say that mediation offers more flexibility in terms of like talking to, different people?
Yes, absolutely. The important distinction between mediation and being a lawyer is that as a mediator, because I'm not representing either of them, I can't give either of them legal advice.
Mm-hmm.
I can give them legal information. So
Oh.
like, there are child support guidelines. This is how they work. What are you going to do about that?
Oh, okay. I see.
Versus as a lawyer, I'm telling them what they're going to do about that. And this is
Oh,
how
I
it's going to
see.
be.
I see.
So,
See.
yeah. And so as a mediator, and 9 times out of 10, it's legal advice is still important. I tell them all to still get legal advice when we're done. But there are a lot of decisions that they can make without legal advice at the beginning stages. Because, like, as soon as they're informed, they're like, oh, this is what we have to do. And they don't fight about it. And then they go get legal advice afterwards to make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. And that's good. Sometimes a couple more apples shake out of the tree and they make decisions about those after that process. But most of it they can get through in a lower conflict situation just by talking about it, just because they don't have the information in front of them.
I see. Well, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, now that you're talking about it, I'm glad that we had this discussion, because now mediation it sort of sounds like you get to, I guess, build a more friendly maybe relationship because you're guiding them instead of sort of dictating, what they have to do and whatnot. And you're giving the clients that freedom to, choose what they sort of want to do.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And out of curiosity, for mediation, is a law degree required, or is it better to have that law degree? Would it help?
So mediation is not a regulated profession.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, you don't even need to be certified to call yourself a mediator. And there's some people who have worked with families in conflict for so long through their other career, whether it's a lawyer, social worker, psychologist, whatever. They've done that for 40 years and they're doing mediation as like a retirement thing. They just say that they're going to be a mediator. The OAFM, most of the people going through that certification process are either lawyers or social workers, psychologists, other maybe child welfare workers from CIS. They've had some kind of exposure to families in crisis, and they're building off of that career to make a shift over.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's probably still a majority of family lawyers doing that, but you don't have to be, if you just got your law degree and wanted to do that, you could.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go through the whole licensing process if you don't want to.
I see. Interesting. Thank you for sharing. All right, Catherine, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, there was such an interesting story that you have. I mean, from, the fun adventures in, UK to now your shift in mediation. And definitely we discussed a lot of interesting topics. And I want to sort of, I guess, slowly get to the end of the session by asking two like general questions that can hopefully help our viewers at home. My first question would be, what advice would you give to your younger self prior to attending law school?
My younger self, I would probably tell her to relax a bit, enjoy what's happening in the moment, and don't worry about the future quite so much. You can never not worry about it 100% at all, but
Right.
you like drop it down to like a good 25-30%. It doesn't have to take up your whole concern. And I would have tried more competitions during the law school period, because that is really the closest thing that you can get to real world practical experience until you get out into the real world and are actually doing practical experience. So mooting, negotiation competitions, mock trials, all of those things, scoop up every opportunity you can to get those.
Absolutely. Thank you. And what advice would you give to the next future generation of aspiring legal professionals?
I would say also maybe relax a little bit. Remember that you always are still dealing with people. Depending on the area of law that you're in, that humanity factor is going to be more or less important, but it's always going to be there. So tap into what that means for you, how you serve your clients, and how it can be a beneficial thing and not seen as a weakness, it's a strength.
Right. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Katherine Denkers. It was amazing having this chance to talk to you and to hear your story. For those viewers watching at home, you can follow Katherine at Denkers Law, I believe, on Instagram to keep up with her page, and you can ask her any questions or comments that you have. And continue to follow Pre-Law Shatterers for more amazing sessions like the one that we just had today.